Continue with Managerial Economics, and we are up to chapter 1. Alright, so what is Managerial Economics? It is the application of microeconomics as it applies to business decision making. That's all it is. Microeconomics, we said, is the subject of economics, which deals with the general decisions of households and businesses. Sometimes households we call individuals, sometimes we just call them families, and sometimes we call them consumers. And firms, we also call them businesses. Sometimes they're called corporations. Okay, so we discussed already assumptions. Assumption is something that we take for granted. From the previous hour, an example of an assumption is, in a global recession, the price of oil in dollar terms will fall. And the answer is, assuming that the demand for dollars falls. Actually, what will happen in a global recession, the US will begin to print massively money to stimulate the economy, and the increase of money supply will lower the value of dollar. So global recession will hit the dollar twice. It will hit the dollar on the demand side because the demand for the dollar will fall, and further it will hit the dollar because the supply of dollars will increase. So global recession will hit the dollar twice on the downside, and it will fall its value a lot more relative to oil. So all we're saying is that the price of oil will actually rise. But the assumption that was built in that global recession will result in lower oil price has the assumption, the incorrect assumption, that the value of the dollar will stay and remain the same. All right?
And is it also assuming that the production of oil is not increasing?
Yes, it additionally assumes that the supply of oil remains constant or unchanged. Of course, the assumption is incorrect. The reason for that is that OPEC has pricing power. This is where we're getting, hopefully, today. So what is pricing power? Pricing power is the ability of a market participant to affect the price of its output, the price of its product. Well, when would you have pricing power? Under what circumstances will someone, the producer, will have pricing power?
If he's the only one?
Oh, if he's the only one. So, if you're the one and only supplier of something, sure you have pricing power. One and only supplier we call?
Market leader.
No, monopolist. Monopolist. So all we're doing now is learning some terminology, okay? So monopolists do have market power. Who else has market power? So you're the one and only. You exert, that's how we say exert market, or you have market power. It means you can affect the price of your own product by supplying more or less of it. What else?
Government.
Government what?
If she forces you to give her something.
Either I don't understand what you're saying or it's not true. Let's try something else. Differentiated product. In other words, products are similar but not really. Meaning, you have two products, they're almost the same. One is a car and the other is a car. But one is a crappy Toyota and the other one is a BMW, right? In other words, BMW differentiates itself through the brand name, okay? So, differentiation may be on a particular characteristic. You know, I have a lot of different, let's say, medicines for headache, okay? But some are different, all right? In Europe, you got a lot of vodkas, but Finlandia is somehow differentiated from the rest of the market, okay? I mean, so if a product is perceived to be somewhat different, even though it might not really be, then the supplier of that product has some market power, not unlimited. Of course, they can't just double, triple, or quadruple the price of Finlandia. Of course, we're going to just switch to Russian vodka, okay? But, they can just charge 20-30% more. And this is exactly what BMW is doing. I mean, they can't just raise their price 3 or 5 times than a comparable Toyota, but they can raise it 30% because it is a BMW, okay? So that's another example of pricing power. So pricing power depends on what we call market structure. So the next I'm jumping 1 point ahead. The next is market, I'm jumping to 1-3, still chapter 1. Market structure. What is market structure? Market structure is the dispersion or the distribution of suppliers and the substitutability of their products. So you could have only 2 suppliers, one supplying 60%, one supplying 40%. Alternatively, you could have 2,000 suppliers, and the biggest one supplying no more than 1%. Okay, so the market structure is determined by how many suppliers you have, what is the relative size of the larger ones, and how different or how similar their products are. Okay, some products may be very different. Other products may be very similar products. Give me examples of relatively different and then relatively similar products. Examples, anybody?
Oil and gas.
Yes, gas, especially gas, very similar. Oil is not as similar as you may think. Not oil, all oils are created different. Some oils are better than others. The Saudi oil is better than the others. How could it be better? Isn't oil the same as oil? Oil has characteristics. One of the characteristics is its weight. Is it thick or is it thin? Right? Does it flow easily or does it flow hard, you know? Is it like engine oil or is it like gasoline, all right? So, oil has other characteristics of acidity. Does it have little sulfur or does it have a lot of sulfur? It has a lot of sulfur, it does a lot of damage because it does corrosion and a whole bunch of other things. If it's heavy, it flows very hard. It requires a phenomenal, very, very costly to refine. So, light, sweet is the best of all oils. Light means it flows easily, it flows like water, okay? Heavy means it flows like engine oil, very difficult to flow. Sweet means very little sulfur, causes no corrosion and other problems. Otherwise, it's not sweet, and it causes a lot. So, different oils, actually very different. You have a heavy sour, and many refiners in the world can't even refine it. So, for oil, doesn't work. Not easy. But sweet sour, Saudi Arabia is perfectly substitutable with sweet sour in Venezuela, in Mexico, in Russia, and everywhere else. So sweet sour, perfectly substitutable with sweet sour. Okay, the most substitutable of them all is clean, pure drinking water. Okay? Again, clean, pure drinking, right? Perfectly substitutable, all right? Standard gasoline, perfectly substitutable, okay? So, what is not, well, substitutable, but not perfectly. There is branding element, is toothpaste. I mean, I prefer one toothpaste, probably you prefer, and my dad doesn't care. He prefers the cheapest, all right? So, let's see what else. What are businesses about? What is the goal of business?
To maximize
Revenue. Profit.
Oh, wait a minute. So, is it revenue or is it profit?
It's profit.
It is profit. We call it profit maximization. How do we call it in simple street English? Profit maximization. To make more money is about making money. So business goal is to make money. And making more money in economics, we call it to make more profit. In other words, the goal of every business, is to maximize profits. Okay? So that's the next big thing. Now, we have a number of different profits. So there is what's called economic profit. And there is accounting profit. Economic profit factors in all costs, every single cost that there is out there. Accounting profits, accounting only monetary costs. Monetary cost means you actually spend spend money on. No problem. So monetary means spending money on. All right. So accounting is only those costs which you spend money on. It's not going to fall, right?
No.
Not this time.
Not this time.
All right. So what might be the difference? Any examples of difference between economic and accounting? The difference are costs which do not involve actually spending money. Example will be my relative of mine who's got a store. He's got a store and he's selling actually engine oils. That's in Bulgaria, of course. And in his store, he's spending money on a whole bunch of things. But because he owns the store is his first floor, his dad's house. So he lives in his mom lives in the second house, and the store is the first. He doesn't actually spend money on rent. Okay? So the economic profits and the economic cost must, we call it, impute or factor the cost of rent, even though he does not actually spend any money on it. In other words, sometimes here the difference is what we now call in economics the opportunity cost of resources. The opportunity cost of resources. So, what is the opportunity cost of his resource? Well, labor. He could work somewhere else and make some salary. So, he could be making $1,000, let's say, dollars, right? If he was working just somewhere else as a laborer, as a worker for somebody else. And the opportunity cost of his shop would be the best rent he could possibly rent it for or get for his shop. So he could get for his shop like $800. He could rent it for $800 because it's in a good location on a main street where a lot of people walk. It's easy, it's convenient, and it's parking and everything else. So his opportunity cost of actually time and the rental turns out to be a total of $1,800. Well, what is he making every month? He's making every month $1,500. So, if he's making $1,500, what is his accounting profit? His accounting profit is $1,500. Okay, the total. Well, what is his economic profit?
The 18. No.
No.
Mine, he's losing.
300.
300.
300. How do we call this losing thing in English? In proper English?
Loss.
Loss. 300 loss. So profit, loss. So actually, his economic loss is 300. Actually, he's not really making money when you factor in all costs, meaning non-monetary costs, okay? Alright, so sometimes entrepreneurs will own their business, and a lot of time they will build their business with their work and with their labor, and the business will have value due to their work and their labor. So when an owner has some value in a business, meaning some ownership in a business, we say that he has, what's the word in English? In finance, in accounting, in economics? Equity. Equity. So, equity, now we don't say has ownership, is the value of ownership, is the capital value of ownership. Ownership says, I own this table, I own this camera. Equity means the value of this camera is $300 and I use this camera for, let's say, commercial purposes, okay? I use the camera to make money, all right? So this represents equity. So equity is the value of the ownership, okay? So the ownership, but measured in money, all right? And now there is a slang which is used widely in the United States. If you build or create equity through a lot of work of your own, it is called sweat equity. You know what sweat means? Drops of perspiration, whether through your forehead or your back, due to excessive heat. Okay? In other words, when do people sweat? They sweat when they work a lot and when they work hard. So sweat equity means equity which is based on labor. Okay? So the difference is that in economic profits you must factor in sweat equity. You must factor in the time that the owner spends on managing or running or whatever the business. It's extremely important. For decision making, one of these two is correct to use and one is incorrect to use. Which should we use? Which is the better measure? For decisions, meaning for economic purposes.
Economic.
Yes, of course. Of course. For economic purposes, the correct measure to use is always economic profits. Okay? So, for economic purposes, it is wrong and incorrect to use accounting profits. Alright? So, why is that? Because, remember, I started early on in economics. Opportunity cost is a defining characteristic of economics. And economics was about decisions and actions. In other words, if there is opportunity cost, you must account for it. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. All right, what's next? Accounting. All right, so what is now what they call as a special term out of economic and accounting, which they call normal profits. So, what is a normal profit? There are very many different ways to think about it. One way to think about is normal profit is to get the opportunity cost. So in this particular case, the normal profit will be like, if he was getting 1,800, he would be getting normal profit, okay? If he was getting 3,000, he would be getting excess profits. In other words, profits is way more than the resources that he puts in. So he has very good profitability. And if he was getting only 15, actually he doesn't even get normal profit. Okay. And positive economic profit is when the revenues exceed all costs, including all opportunity costs. It is the positive economic profit which creates value. Which creates value. In other words, in the macroeconomy, a lot of times politicians think in terms of creating jobs. Can I create jobs for the whole Saudi nation? Sure, it's very easy. Here's a scheme. You guys will dig holes and you guys will fill them up. Can I create for the whole Saudi nation jobs? Sure, I can create for the whole Chinese nation. I can create for the whole world. But the question is, are these real jobs? And the answer is, they're not real. Now, you got to tell me, what's a real job in this economic sense of the word? What's real job? It's
The one with positive profit.
okay, so it is job that contributes to positive or at least normal profit. So it is a job, it is labor which actually contributes to a product which or a business which will ultimately contribute to economic profit. And there's one other characteristic, extremely important. It is implied within the profit, but we must state it explicitly. Anybody? For these real jobs? Whatever they produce, there must be willing consumer to pay money for the product. In other words, my jobs weren't real because no one was willing to pay one person to dig holes and the other person to fill it up. All right? So we call this, we got a word for it in English. How do we call these kind of words in the one or the other case? We got a word from the first lecture. It was written right here. Productive. It's not just having a job. The job has to be productive. Productive means creating value. Okay? So productive means that it produces enough to create positive economic profit. Or at least that the economic profit is not actually a loss. Okay? In other words, what we call to create normal profit. All right? Is that now clear? All right, I hope so. So, positive, let's see what's next. We're trying to finish off. We have like 5 minutes. Let's just pause here and we'll continue because there is nothing I can do for 1 or 2 minutes. So, we are done for today. Let's hit the pause button.